tendency to drain us to the point where we feel like we're...
I don't know if y'all have ever been that way or not, but I know I have. And sadly, that's when life can seem to begin to rob us of our joy. It's what happens when we run out of joy. And when we run out of joy, life just isn't as good, is it? I mean, even though you may have all the stuff, if you don't have the joy to go with it, it's just not the same. So maybe today you've lost some of your joy. Maybe something's troubling you. Maybe something's bothering you. I mean, the world is full of worries and disappointments and hurts and grief and all of these activities, the violence on the streets that we see. It impacts at the very core of our being, does it not? And it drains us. And sometimes when that happens, we just lose our joy. And I want you to know today that Jesus cares about that. So much so that we see an example, and the first miracle that he performed in his life mission was restoring joy to a wedding celebration in Cana of Galilee. Let's read the story together. It's a short story. It'll only last a couple minutes. It was on the third day. A wedding took place at Cana in Galilee. Jesus' mother was there, and Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. And when the wine was gone, Jesus' mother said to him, "They have no more wine." "Woman, why do you involve me?" Jesus replied. "My hour has not yet come." Well, his mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." Nearby stood 6 stone water jars, the kind used by the Jews for ceremonial washing, each holding from 20 to 30 gallons. And Jesus said to the servants, "Fill the jars with water." So they filled them to the brim. Then he told them, "Now draw some out and take it to the master of the banquet." They did so. And the master of the banquet tasted the water that had been turned into wine. He didn't realize where it had come from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew. Then he called the bridegroom aside and said, "Everyone brings out the choice wine first, and then the cheaper wine after the guests have had too much to drink. But you have saved the best till now." And what Jesus did here in Cana of Galilee was the first of the signs through which he revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him. The word of the Lord. Jesus restored joy, and he can do the same thing for each and every one of us here today. So how can Jesus restore your joy? First and foremost, you have to be where Jesus is if you want to be restored by his joy. So Jesus and his disciples found themselves at a wedding feast. Now, we all know that today a wedding is pretty expensive. I mean, I've been a participant of having to pay for a couple of those, and it's very expensive. But then in that day and time, a Jewish wedding celebration would last for a whole week. The father of the bride and their family would all parade through the town, and then all the townspeople would join them, and they would end up at the groom's house, and there at the front door of the groom's house they would perform the ceremony. And then the feast would begin. It lasted for 7 full days, all paid for by the groom's family. There was no honeymoon. Instead, they had a 7-day open house celebration at the house of the bride and groom. Can you imagine that? Lots of food, lots of wine, lots of celebration. So Jesus and these first 5 disciples that he had already selected were there at this celebration. And now, I'm not real sure how much these disciples would have enjoyed being there. They weren't what you would call socialites. They weren't the outgoing type of people that might enjoy something like this, especially if it wasn't their family. And we don't really know whether they were or not, but I know 2 of the disciples that Jesus had called were followers of John the Baptist. And we talked about John last week. He lived in the wilderness, lived off the land. They were introverted type people, and people would come to them, but it wasn't for a social gathering. And the others were fishermen. That's kind of a lonely job too. It's not like they were the head of a PR, or involved with public relations all that much. But Jesus was teaching them that he was distinctive, that he loved being with people, that he enjoyed social occasions. He enjoyed it when people celebrated life, especially when it involved a covenant with God. So most people were comfortable around Jesus, and Jesus was comfortable around them. As a matter of fact, you remember he was criticized by the religious leaders of that day because of his love of life and his love for people. I mean, they falsely accused Jesus of being a glutton, a drunkard. He was one who was a friend of tax collectors and sinners. But Jesus, whenever he entered into an event, he brought joy into people's lives. And that's what happens when we are where Jesus is. And on the flip side of that, the further away you are from Jesus in your spiritual life, the further away you will also be from his joy. But the closer you are to Jesus, the more of his joy you will experience. You see, because Jesus is fully aware of the truth that the prophet Nehemiah stated, the joy of the Lord is your strength. That is what sustains each and every one of us, is the strength that we receive from the joy of the Lord. So today, if you're lacking joy, or if you've lost your joy, then spend some time with Jesus and let him restore that joy to you. And the second thing I can see from this story, to restore our joy, we need to be aware of the needs, and maybe not even our own, but the needs of those who are around us. Mary, the mother of Jesus, did that. She saw that there was a problem. They didn't have any wine. And it's important for us to understand, in the Jewish culture, wine was often referenced and it was likened to joy. So if you didn't have wine, you didn't have joy. And that was part of their lifestyle in that day and time. And it was a very serious situation, especially in a wedding feast celebration, because the groom's family was responsible for supplying enough wine to last the entire week, and for whatever reason, they ran out. And that was a big deal. They couldn't just go down to the corner store and buy more wine. They were out of wine. The resource of wine was tapped and drained for whatever reason, and it was a family disaster. It would be like McDonald's running out of hamburgers. It would be like IHOP being out of pancakes. It just doesn't happen. You don't run out of wine at a wedding feast. And the bottom line here is that Jesus saw the need because his mother presented it to him, and he cares. Jesus truly cares about your every need. Listen to me. If it's important to you, it's important to him. Jesus truly cares. If you've lost your sense of joy, if you have a problem that just seems too big, Jesus cares. He really, truly does. Seek him. Seek his presence, because he wants to bring that joy back into your life. Now, I remember when I was a boy, and if my mom told me, "Dan, go take out the trash," and I responded to her, "A woman, that is not my concern. My hour has not yet come," she would have quickly revealed to me that my hour had come, and I better take out that trash right now. That would have been the way it was. That statement in and of itself kind of sounds harsh, doesn't it, in our culture? But you need to remember that Jesus didn't use the word that we call mom or mother. He used a word that was woman, but in the original language, it was a term of endearment. It was a word that you used to call a lady, a woman. That word was given the highest regard of respect. And that particular word that Jesus used when he responded to his mother was only used twice by Jesus in the entire New Testament. The first time was here at the wedding feast. The second time was when he was on the cross. And he said, "Woman, behold your son." Wow. It was with the greatest amount of respect. Jesus was reflecting to his mom, "You know who I am. You know the ministry that I am here to fulfill. But the time of the cross is not here yet. You know, I have probably never understood why Jesus said to her what he said to her and why he said it until this week as I was reflecting and praying over this text. I think in my heart of hearts that Jesus was letting Mom know, yes, the cross is coming, but this isn't it. I'm going to start revealing my glory today, but I'm not hanging on the cross tomorrow. I think he was giving her some assurance and some comfort to let her know that even though she knew what lay ahead, it wasn't gonna be today. However, Jesus, being the godly man that he was going to listen to his mommy. He had to obey and honor his mother, and he heard the request that was needed at the wedding feast. Mary made Jesus fully aware of the need that was there. The joy was gone, and Jesus had to do something about it. The bottom line is you can ignore the fact that you've lost your joy, or you can take it to Jesus with whatever it is that's robbing you of that joy. So if you want the joy to be restored and refilled in your life, be where Jesus is, and then be aware of the needs that may be in your own life and the needs that are around you, and take those needs to Jesus. And the third thing that we need to do from this text today is we need to realize we must be obedient. Mary knew what to do. Let Jesus handle it. Turn it over to him. I mean, she didn't know what to do, but she had full confidence that he did. She absolutely did. She knew that Jesus, her son, would take care of this situation no matter what it was. So there were 20 to 30, or 6 large 20 to 30 gallon jugs that were used for Jewish purification rites. That they would rinse and cleanse in them before and after they ate meals. And by this time, probably a lot of the water that was in those 6 stone jars was probably gone. So Jesus told them to fill the jars, fill them to the brim. But they didn't need water. They needed wine. They didn't understand what water was going to do to solve this problem. But here's the cool thing about this story. They did it anyway. How many times have we said, Lord says, go do this, Dan, and I say, why, Lord? That doesn't make any sense. Well, it didn't make any sense to them either. How is water going to bring back joy to the celebration? They needed wine. They didn't understand why Jesus told them what to do, but they obeyed him, and they did it anyway. 6 stone jars with 20 to 30 gallons of wine would yield approximately 2,880 8-ounce glasses of wine. Now, I don't know about you, but that'd bring the joy back to about any wedding celebration, wouldn't it? And it did. So if you want to have the joy restored to your life, then obey Jesus. You see, the truth is, when we live in disobedience to Jesus and his word, then we begin to lose our joy as well. So we got to be where Jesus is. We've got to be aware of the needs. We must be obedient to do whatever Jesus tells us. And then third, or last, we need to be the best. You know, usually they served the best wine at the beginning, and it was to impress the people that were there. I mean, usually when there was a wedding feast in the town, the high authorities of the town would all be invited. The who's who, the guest list, the red carpet, whatever you want to call it, was rolled out. And they wanted to impress those people with what they had brought. So the best wine was served first when they could still taste it. Before they got inebriated, and it didn't matter what they were drinking. You hear what I'm saying? In some translations, it says that this was literally the best wine they had ever tasted. And believe you me, in that day and that time, the culture was blessed with lots of wine. And those people had probably tasted some of the very best fruit of the vine ever produced in that day and time. But this was the best wine. And Jesus took wash water and turned it into the best wine. So it brings me to a question. Am I doing my best for Jesus? Be honest. Ask yourself that question. Am I doing my best for Jesus? And if Jesus can take wash water and turn it into the best wine, think what he could do with us. I mean, do you want God's best in your life? Do you? I mean, I think a lot of us would probably settle for God's second best, wouldn't we? I mean, it's probably way better than what we've got. But I think there's way too many Christians that are settling for a lot less than that. We're kind of like stone water jars. As a matter of fact, the Bible refers to us as earthen vessels. And what is it that Jesus wants to do with us? He wants to fill us up to the brim with the best that we can possibly be. Now, the scriptures didn't call this out, but I did some research, and customarily in that day and time when they would refill these wash jars for ceremonial washing, they would empty out the dirty wash water before they would pour clean wash water in. Kind of makes sense, doesn't it? But it reminded me of a truth. A problem a lot of us may have in our world today is that the old wash water that is in us is still there, and there's no room left for the new wine. There's no room left for the best wine that Jesus wants to give us. So maybe, just maybe, we need to empty ourselves of some bitterness or some hatred or a spirit of unforgiveness. Maybe we need to empty ourselves of guilt and resentment and selfish living so that Jesus can once again fill us up. Maybe today we do need to surrender all, come to the foot of the cross, and empty ourselves so that Jesus can fill us with the best that we can possibly be. You see, only when we are empty of ourselves can Jesus then in turn offer you the very best. And remember, he can take wash water and turn it into the best wine ever. Empty yourself today. Be filled to the brim with new wine and overflow with the spiritual gift of joy that Jesus longs to give to you today. So I don't know, maybe you've lost your excitement. Maybe you have lost some of your joy. Maybe we all need to cry out like King David did, "Restore unto me, Lord, the joy of your salvation." Maybe we all need that. If the Lord's speaking to your heart today, are you ready to say to the Lord today, "Restore to me the joy of your salvation"? Because Jesus wants so much to bring you along an exciting, a joy-filled journey, no matter what circumstances your life may be facing. So empty your vessel this morning of all that dishonors Jesus, and he will fill you anew. He will not leave you empty. He will fill you to the brim with the power and the strength of his joy. Be where Jesus is. Be aware of the needs that are in your life. Be obedient to whatever Jesus tells you to do about it. And then be the best that you can possibly be. And the joy of the Lord will be your strength. In closing today, I want to sing one of my favorite joy songs, and it's a Christmas song, but that's okay, because Joy to the World is an all-year song, isn't it? It's not just a Christmas song. Joy to the world, the Lord is come. Let's sing it together.